Dante and Nevaeh, right? So.
She's bringing hers Tuesday.
Okay, great. Weekly reading data, guys. Have a seat. I will come to you. Raise your hands when you're ready for me to check it. Have a seat. I will come to you. Sorry, I don't know. Once you're done, guys, you can put your iPads away.
Did everybody get a guided notes worksheet, guys? Yes. Alright, guys. So, soon you're going to start reading Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry by Mildred D. Taylor. So today, I kind of just want to go over some background knowledge on some of the themes, topics, etc. In front of you, you should have guided notes. So throughout the lesson, you're kind of going to follow along with me. I'll make sure that you're on the same beat as me, and we're going to get moving. So first, raise your hand if you have heard of the Great Depression. I heard you guys just covered it in history, right? Yeah, so go ahead and talk amongst your table partners and talk to them about what you know about the Great Depression. That was a quick discussion. Okay, let's have 3 people share out what they know about the Great Depression. Give me a couple things. You think for a second, but you just talked to table partners. What's up, Avery?
So a lot of people lost their jobs.
Yep, unemployment was incredibly high. Somebody else want to share what they said to their partner?
A lot of businesses and stores shut down due to the Great Depression.
Absolutely. Let me get one more. You can share what your partner said too if you want. Okay, we can move on. So, oh, what's up? Sorry.
Wasn't it inflation?
Yeah.
That was super.
Yep, big stock market crash and then,
Yeah.
Okay, so these are some of the themes that are going to be discussed throughout Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. They're not all of the themes because it's not just a terribly sad book the whole time, I promise you that.
But discrimination, racism, and segregation, I'm sure we've all heard of those, but you're gonna come across them in the book, and it might make you a little uncomfortable, none of us wanna hear about it, none of us wanna see it, but it happened, and it is important to talk about. So, did you guys get the first one on the notes? Okay. We can come back to it too, there's no rush. So, what was the Great Depression? In short, you guys were definitely on the right track. It was an economic crisis that affected multiple countries. It started in the United States, where our stock market crashed, and then boom. Production and trade were at an all-time low, while unemployment was at an all-time high. So, with those two go hand in hand. Unemployment was at an all-time high. So there weren't enough people working, there weren't enough people producing what the people need, so they weren't getting the food that they needed, the clothes that they needed, etc. Someone in the last class told me that mac and cheese was invented because it was cheap. Yeah? Okay, well that's something that I learned about it. So, so industries in general just plummeted following the huge stock market crash. I was gonna say something that I don't remember. I might come back to it. A big thing about the Great Depression is that it affected African Americans differently than it affected white people in a more negative way. So one of those ways is that racial violence became more common with Black Americans being attacked by white Americans because everybody was panicking and they decided that they needed to take out their anger. African American unemployment was much higher than white unemployment at greater than 50%, while white unemployment hit 31.7%. A lot of that kind of stems from that white people were taking jobs from African Americans because they needed jobs as well, and it was easier for them to steal it than to find their own, because as we said back here, employers were not making money to pay employees, so they just could not hire anybody. And nobody wants to work for free, right? Okay, so you should have 1 through 4 filled out on your guided notes. Does anyone need me to go back? Raise your hand if you do. You need me to go back?
Yeah.
What number are you looking at?
Number 2.
2? Oh, yeah, that was quick, sorry. 1929 to 1941. Okay, raise your hands if you have heard of Jim Crow laws. Yes. Okay, go ahead and talk to your table partners for a couple minutes about what you know, what they make you think of. Go ahead. All good? Okay, does anybody want to share out what they do know about Jim Crow?
There are laws that make segregation legal.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
They pretty much enforced segregation.
Yeah. Yep. Anything else? That's a great basis, guys. Okay, so on the right track once again. Good job, guys. Jim Crow laws were laws used to legalize racially based segregation. Segregation means separating, and in this case, white and Black Americans from one another. The laws were used to marginalize African Americans in the United States and revoke any chance of them voting in elections. So, they were not allowed to vote, and the whole basis of the Jim Crow laws were, quote, separate but equal, but they didn't turn out being equal, and we're gonna kind of get into that in a little bit. But, let's see. Okay, go ahead and talk to your table partners once again about an example of what the segregation was during this time. Yeah, I heard schools, water fountains. Did I hear someone say churches? I think someone did. Yeah, you guys are definitely on the right track there. So it was schools, water fountains, bathrooms, churches, public services, and voting. And so for bathrooms, for an example, there would be a white bathroom and there would be a black bathroom, and that's how they were supposed to separate. So with public services, guys, can you think of any examples of what I mean when I say public services?
Transportation.
Transportation, yeah. Nevaeh, do you have any? Okay. Any other ideas? Yeah, you're kind of right. You know, transportation, grocery stores, anything out in public, it had to be separated. So, Jim Crow laws were supposed to create this separate but equal situation, but African Americans encountered inferiority in all aspects among said segregation. So they would have worse schools, their water fountains, bathrooms, you know, maybe would be gross, weren't up to date, weren't clean. Churches, kind of think of the African Americans would get, you know, run down buildings or things that they needed to work on to get them up to par. Public services, and they just weren't allowed to vote. So, has anybody heard of sharecropping? Oh, perfect. Okay, go ahead and talk to your table partner about what sharecropping is in your own words, and then we can go ahead and share out. Okay, does anybody want to share what they talked about? What's up?
It's where farmers would like borrow equipment, and so they would farm their season, and if they didn't get enough crops to sell, they would go into debt, and the same process would repeat over many years.
Yeah, that was a great way to put that. And a lot of that was where the African Americans were just, they were just in a hole, and they just kept going deeper and deeper and owing more and more money. So, it was a huge staple to agriculture in the South, especially at this time, although it is used today, but it's used so much more fairly today. So, kind of like what Christian said, Christian, right? Yeah, kind of like what Christian said, it's when a farmer essentially rents a part of a larger farm, and that includes the equipment, the land space, everything, so they can work in that area and gain a percentage of the crops that comes from it. This was used then and today, but it was not so even during the Great Depression. White people still ended up too greedy, giving African Americans less than they deserve on the grounds of superiority. So when I say superiority, you guys know what I mean, right? Yeah. Like, oh, I'm better than you, so I can do what I want. Yeah. Okay, we should have 1 through 8 filled out. Does anybody need me to go back at all? Thumbs up if you're filled out 1 through 8 so far. Okay, I'll give a little bit of time.
And can you go back to number 7?
Yes. Let's see. 3. Oh, yeah. So now we're going to move on to lynching. Show me your hand if you have heard of lynching. Okay, so I'm just going to go right into it. It was mainly used for white people to kill African Americans in public, or really anybody who had a different skin color other than themselves. And it normally took place in the form of public hanging and or torture. It was a form of violence where a mob would execute someone without any sort of trial or proof. So essentially, they would look at an African American, say, he did this, I don't have any proof, I'm not going to take him to trial, but I promise you he did this. So a big mob would come get that person, take them out in public, and do terrible things to them in front of anybody that would watch. And there were people that would watch. This was defended by the mobs by saying they are administering justice. So whites would find basically any excuse such as sexual crimes, thievery crimes, etc. to pin on the African Americans for the excuse to murder them. We get, that one is number 9, guys. Did we get that? Let's just read that one. Go ahead and read out loud when I pause. I'll read up until the spaces. Lynching is a form of where a mob would
Execute.
someone without any form of
Trial.
or
Proof.
perfect. Thank you, guys. Okay. So I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of information about Mildred D. Taylor. A little bit more of a positive note here. She visited Mississippi and heard stories from families of those who had to live through these trying times. She wrote Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry in 1976 because she was moved by the stories of her family members. So a lot of the stories, she bases Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry off of her family and off of stories that she heard from those who had to go through things like this. I just said that. The stories within the novel are based on their own family. It's important to read stories like this so we can become knowledgeable about this specific time in U.S. history while actively avoiding repeating said history. So go ahead and talk to your table partners one more time and give me an example of why it's important to read about things like this and learn about things like this. So give them an example and then we'll bring it back to the front. Okay, someone want to tell me why it's important, other than what I wrote? Is it important to learn about things like this? Why? Is it comfortable to learn about things like this all the time? No. But it's important to recognize what happened, how it happened, when it happened, and what happened to these people. Unfortunately. Okay, let's see, we got 2 minutes. Let's just go through the notes, make sure we have
Actually, you have until 9:36.
9:36? Oh, 36?
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was 26. Never mind, I didn't know. Okay. Anyways, let's go through the notes anyways. So, number 1, give me one theme covered. Give me another one.
Discrimination.
Altogether, the Great Depression took place from
1929 to 1941.
during the Great Depression, production and trade were at an
All-time low.
while unemployment was at an
All-time high.
white unemployment reached
31.7%.
while African American unemployment hit
50%.
during this time in the United States. Jim Crow laws lasted
100 years.
if Jim Crow laws were used to legalize
Segregation.
3 forms of segregation. Oh, let's just list 1 form of segregation that took place as a result of the laws. Schools. Okay. The whites still ended up too greedy, giving African Americans less than they deserve on the grounds of
Superiority.
lynching is a form of
Violence.
where a mob would
Execute.
someone without any form of
Trial.
or
Proof.
the mobs defended themselves in the name of
Justice.
Good job, guys. Okay. So we're gonna go back. Go ahead and flip over your notes. It should be blank. Yes. So this right here, Jim Crow laws were. By the way, this is supposed to be Jim Crow laws were, not Jim Crow law was. Jim Crow laws were supposed to create a separate but equal situation, but African Americans encountered inferiority in all aspects among the segregation. So I want you to take a look at that, think to yourself for a little bit, and kind of put that into your own words. Does that make sense? So read that one sentence, think to yourself for a little bit, you can discuss with your partner, put it in your own words, and go ahead and write it on the back of your notes. Take about 30 seconds to wrap that up, guys. Once your pencils stop moving, I will know you're done. Don't need to rush, we have 10 more minutes than I thought we did. Okay, before we share those out, I want you to think to yourself, one thing that you learned throughout this, one piece of new information that you learned during this lesson. So go ahead and think to yourself. Take 20 seconds to think to yourself. You can write it if you want, you definitely don't have to. Okay, go ahead and share with your partners one new piece of information you gained during this lesson.
I really couldn't deal with this stuff, but definitely mentioning something to me.
Yeah, that's new information for a lot of people. All right, let's bring it back to the front. Does anybody want to share one new piece of information they learned? Avery?
Is it lynching?
Lynching.
Lynching. I didn't know that they did that during the Great Depression.
Yeah, it's nasty stuff. Anybody else? Okay, let's go back to the sentence that you wrote. Go ahead and share that with your table partner as well. Can everybody share? Alright, I want 3 people to share their sentence. Nevaeh?
I wrote Jim Crow laws were supposed to be separate but equal, but instead it wasn't. African Americans felt like it was unfair, so people would challenge the law. It was almost like slavery but legal.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's a great way to put that. Christian?
Jim Crow laws were supposedly to be equal, but turned into racism, segregation, and destruction for African Americans.
Give me one more.
Jim Crow laws were a segregation of law enforced by Southerners against African Americans who showed who they interacted with and what they did.
Yeah. Some of you guys put that better than I did. I'm jealous. Okay, so everybody has 1 through 10 filled out, right? And on the back, you each have a sentence. Perfect. Okay, so those can go in the binder.
Binders behind novel studies.
Yeah, that.
Tuesday will be gone to our field trip. Wednesday, you'll get a copy of Roll of Thunder, You Might Cry, and we'll start reading it. And I'm just gonna warn you, the first few chapters are slow, but it gets really good once the action starts happening. So just prepare yourself. Don't be ready to throw out the book right away. Okay?